Symone Sanders is making an accusation against Donald Trump, and this is in reference to the 2024 election. Now, I don't know if everyone has heard this story yet, but apparently we talked before about Fonny Willis, the DA that's actually on the Georgia case. We've covered that on this show before. So it has now apparently been ruled that she is allowed to actually stay on that case with certain provisions. And that is discussed in a panel here on MSNBC. Of course, Symone Sanders is leading this panel. You have to understand her role as well. She's there to tell you to support the Dem establishment. Although at one point she was a part of the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2016, Symone Sanders has been following the money. So she moved over to the Biden campaign in 2020. She was hoping to get that press secretary gig for Joe Biden. He chose Jen Psaki instead. And now she has a spot on MSNBC. So she's been following this money. In order for her to keep that spot, she has to parrot certain talking points that is favorable of the Democrat establishment. Let's go into this, and we're going to hear about these accusations that she's making towards Donald Trump. Listen to this.
Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade has officially stepped down from the Georgia election interference case. His resignation coming just hours. Scott McAfee found that there was no actual conflict stemming from Wade's relationship with Fulton County District Attorney Fonny Willis, and that the prosecution of Trump and his co-defendants could continue as long as either Wade or Willis resigned. Joining us now to discuss it all is our friend Katie Phang, attorney and host of the Katie Phang Show right here on MSNBC, and our other friend, MSNBC Justice and Legal Affairs analyst Anthony Coley. Coley is a former senior advisor to Attorney General Merrick Garland.
All right.
Okay. Anthony Coley wrote a piece.
Where do we go? Okay.
Anthony Coley wrote a piece for MSNBC.com talking, and you also have some tweets, okay? And you write that without sufficient evidence that the district attorney acquired a personal stake in the prosecution. Right. We'll put it back up on the screen so people can see it. In the prosecution, you talk about Willis making a strong argument for why she should stay on the case against Trump, but she needs to remove her team, the attorney general from whom she had the attorney from whom she had a personal relationship. You wrote this second one that we just put up months ago. Right. You said months ago that Nathan Wade got to go, Fonny Willis should stay. You had some tweets yesterday that I was like, Talk to us about how you see this. Right. You yourself are not an attorney, but you advise the chief attorney of this country. How do you see this situation playing out in Georgia?
Right. So Nathan Wade, honestly, he's, from all accounts, he's a good dude, but his continuation on this case is a distraction. And I do want to give him credit here, Symone. Fonny Willis tried to find a lot of people, Michael, to try to help her with this case. He was the one who stepped up and said yes. This is even after he had a cancer scare. And to his credit, under his leadership, they have secured 4 guilty pleas in this case. And this is the only case of the 4 major cases where there has been guilty pleas. So I give him credit for that. Now, should he have engaged in a relationship with his boss? Probably not. But at its core, the relationship did not have anything to do with the underlying effort, Trump's effort to steal an election. And secondly, there was no financial benefit here. So
here's the thing about this. Should you have a relationship with your boss? Guys, don't date your boss. Just don't. Just don't date your boss. But what's interesting about this here is we always have to ask ourselves, if the shoe was on the other foot, if it was the other side, let's pretend it wasn't Donald Trump. Let's pretend it was Joe Biden that this was happening to, right? But we can use an example of Tara Reade's accusations against Joe Biden, right? Would Symone Sanders and the rest of this panel on MSNBC have the same perception that they do against Donald Trump, against Joe Biden? No, they wouldn't, because they're paid to tell you that the Democratic Party is doing the right thing, the Republican Party is doing the wrong thing. So the days of having this type of media, I guess like the Walter Cronkite media, those days are long gone. And that's the thing that you notice with a lot of mainstream media, MSNBC, CNN, Fox News. Fox News do the same thing. If it's Joe Biden that has accusations, they're going to have coverage that is, favorable to making sure that Joe Biden is held accountable. So MSNBC is going to have coverage that is favorable to making sure that Donald Trump is held accountable. right? So we just have to remember that when we're listening to these cases, because my thing is, where was this same type of push and rhetoric and call in reference to Joe Biden when Tara Reid came forward with her accusations about him?
I wish he had stepped down earlier because this has been a 2.5 month delay, but I'm glad he did now. Now we can focus on what really matters.
But Katie, it's not just about the relationship, in my estimation. It's about the perception of the relationship in the context of a very high-profile case against a former president of the United States and a lot of the politics that builds up around that. When you look at the judge's ruling, he was not polite, let's put it that way, in his assessment of the prosecutor's behavior, both of their behaviors. What was your takeaway from that moment? The politics notwithstanding, just looking at it first from a legal standpoint, that kind of reprimand, if you will, but okay, you can still play, but he got to go.
Well, the challenge that I offer you, Michael, to the question you just posed to me is, I don't think that you can eliminate the politics from that question. I think they're inextricably intertwined. And the reason why I say that is I've respectfully disagreed with now Anthony and others who I think are brilliant. But here's the flaw in that logic that they have. This would have happened no matter what. Even if both Wade and Willis had said from day one, we were in a relationship, past tense. And that's the other important thing. That relationship was over as of last year, right? Before this case went to grand jury and was indicted for the 19 co-defendants. Even if they had fallen on the sword, not like they did anything wrong, and said we had a personal relationship, I would give everything to bet that this hearing would have happened no matter what, because this is exactly what the defendants wanted to advance. And from a legal standpoint, because they raised a colorable question about disqualification, that is the reason why Judge McAfee had to conduct the hearing. But full stop. The hearing and the way within which it was conducted was done pursuant to the rules of evidence and criminal procedure. I take no umbrage with the judge when it comes to that. But when you come to the ruling itself, Michael, there is a point in the ruling about, 8 pages in where the analysis could have stopped. Forgiving maybe some of the other parts where he did an assessment of credibility later on for people like Terrence Bradley, etc. But the analysis could have stopped with there is no evidence of an actual conflict of interest because there's no evidence of any financial benefit, etc. That's when you could have had the cessation of the analysis, but not. He went further. And if you really look and you drill down at the law that he cited to for purposes of appearance of impropriety, he admits that it's really kind of dealing with personal relationships with witnesses and victims, etc., which none of us, including me, would ever disagree with him about. But that's not what the factual scenario was here. And he also goes forward in his ruling and says that this is a fact-based analysis. So if that's the case, once he heard that the defense couldn't carry its burden, that was a place for him to say, they didn't carry the burden, I'm not disqualifying. The added commentary is what taints the prosecution moving forward. The added commentary is something that I said last night, which is he says that he gave Fonny Willis a chance to cure the defect. She cured it by Nathan Wade stepping down, who was the lead prosecutor on the case, second to her. But then it's really not cured because now she moves forward with a, quote, odor of mendacity on this prosecution, and that's a problem.
Well, and that is.
Well, let me just say something here really quickly as well. Even though they said that she can stay on this case, honestly, I think if I were her, I would just step down. Actually, if I was her, I wouldn't have been sleeping with my employee, but that's another situation. But the thing is that she should probably just step down. Because going forward, and I said this before, I said, if you look at the evidence that they have against him in reference to the Georgia election, the evidence is actually pretty damning. But going forward, as long as she remains on this case, there's going to be a lot of doubt. There's going to be a lot of pushback and say, oh, we can't trust her because she lied about this. She lied about that. And, I think the right thing for her to do would be to step down. But I don't think she's going to do that. Let's move forward a little bit here because she went on for a long time. I want to fast forward to the Symone part here. Oh, here it is. Okay, here we go.
but you're not center stage.
Can
I say something?
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, they tried to steal an election.
Right.
The former president of the United States of America and his little friends, as my mother would say, tried to steal an election.
Now, here's the hypocrisy, right? Okay. There have been many people, particularly those who are supporting or were supporting the other Democrat candidates that were running against Joe Biden. There have been many of those people that were actually criticizing Joe Biden and the DNC and the Democratic Party for refusing to hold debates with those people, for refusing to allow those candidates to receive any types of delegates. I mean, Symone Sanders, you really can't. Both parties do it. Both parties do it. You really can't sit here and pretend like this only has happened with Donald Trump or the Republican Party. The Democratic Party, the DNC, has been known for doing this. We can go back to 2016 with Bernie Sanders. We talked about this before, the DNC fraud lawsuit, how they actually said in court that the DNC is a private corporation and that actually they can pick who they want, regardless of who people, vote for. So that's coming from a federal judge in reference to the DNC fraud lawsuit. That came from him, who made that statement that the DNC doesn't even have to obey their own charter. So this is the hypocrisy, folks. So how can you sit here and you criticize what's happening with Donald Trump for the Georgia issue when you say, oh, they're trying to steal and da-da-da-da, and you do the same thing? They all do it. It's all rigged. I've been talking about this forever. Like how they can just stop counting. Are you kidding me? They all do it. They're all guilty of it. Ay, ay, ay.
And the DA, Fonny Willis, is seeking to hold them accountable.
Right.
And because she sought that accountability, they, the former president and his little friends, the allies, Ashley Merchant, the attorney for one of those individuals, they then tried to distract us with salacious gossip, because that is what this is, because if there were facts, we would have found them. And it worked so.
Pause. The same thing happened with the Democratic Party. Remember the DNC fraud lawsuit, right? So what was that about? That was actually the Becks. So Jared Beck and his wife, who they were actually approached by Nico House. Nico House said, yo, can you guys, help with this? That DNC fraud lawsuit, what they argued in court was that, yes, the DNC rigged it against Bernie Sanders in favor of Hillary Clinton. And what the federal judge said was that basically doesn't matter because this is a private corporation and they can do what they want. They really don't owe you. Just because you donated money to Bernie Sanders doesn't mean they owe you anything. And just because you voted for or picked Bernie Sanders doesn't mean they have to select that person as the eventual nominee. So they argued that in court. Now, after the DNC fraud lawsuit, who was getting smeared then? Bernie Sanders was the one that was getting smeared. So the same thing that Symone Sanders is saying here right now, right? How they're smearing Fanny and all that kind of stuff. This happened already. It may not have been because of personal relationships, but they threw smears towards Bernie Sanders. Let's remember Debbie Weiserman Schultz. She was a smear machine as well. She was chairman of the DNC. So both parties do it. And my thing is, where was that call out then from MSNBC? They defended Hillary Clinton because that's the candidate that the donors want.
So much so that very well-meaning people who know a lot, lots of very smart lawyers in this country are walking around and sitting up on television being like, well, I don't know if Fonny Willis could stay on this case. This was a distraction.
Alvin Bragg doesn't have that problem in New York.
But this was a distraction because they haven't tried to distract him with this.
Like, they don't have anything to hang on Alvin Bragg's head.
They can make it up. They didn't have anything about Fonny Willis. And I'm so animated about this. I'm sorry. I'm very animated about this because this is... We all have a duty, I think, to remind people about what this is really about. And frankly, if Fonny Willis was a man named Frank, I don't believe that they would have been able to distract us with the salacious gossip about, oh, well, Frank hired Susie so that Frank could financially benefit from Susie being on the case.
So now Symone Sanders is saying, basically, I'm going to tell you what she's really saying. She's basically saying that if Fanny were Frank, so if it was a man, then this wouldn't even be an issue. We wouldn't be talking about the gossip. I disagree. I disagree. I don't think it matters that she's a female. I think there would still be some type of gossip about it. This is partisan politics.
It is
I'm so happy.
a little sexist. It's a little racist.
Yeah, and
Well,
Symone, I'm happy
here's
because you were focusing. Can I just say you were focusing us on what really matters here, right? I think about that moment when Fonny Willis said, "I'm not the one who's on trial here, Katie." So what does it mean when you zoom out, Katie, for accountability for Donald Trump, who is actually the person who is on trial?
Well, like you.
Let me just pause here. So the other thing I wanted to add too is that if Fanny were the guy named Frank, they would still come after him because, again, they're representing Donald Trump. They're not representing Fanny. Like, of course, they would still go after that person. They're going to try to get as much dirt on them as they could possible. That's just politics. So I don't think that was a good place for her to use that. Yes, discrimination happens. Yes, sexism happens. But I don't think you can play that card just whenever. Just whenever. So that's the kind of thing with Symone Sanders. I feel like she was trying to play that card like just whenever, when the reality is, if it were a guy who were the DA, they would still go after him too because it's partisan politics. Jesus Christ. And I think we want to move forward a little bit. I think I was going to end with his part here. Actually, no, we can stop it there because I'm actually going to go to the next clip. Now, what's interesting about that is that now there is a statement from Donald Trump. Apparently, he made a statement saying that if he doesn't win in November, it will be a bloodbath. And a lot of people have been pushing back on this, including Republicans too, not just Democrats. Let's get into this clip here.
And Donald Trump hit the campaign trail in the battleground state of Ohio for the first time since securing the Republican nomination. And President Biden attended the annual D.C. Gridiron dinner, both candidates issuing very different warnings on the campaign trail. With the very latest, Sarakshi Rai from The Hill joining us this morning. Sarakshi, good morning. Trump had some pretty strong words campaigning in Ohio yesterday. What did our former president have to say?
He really, hit the ball running on the campaign trail in Ohio. He was campaigning for Republican candidate for Senate, Bernie Moreno, whose primaries are coming up on Tuesday, where he really was talking about the auto industry, but then went into a comment saying that there would be a bloodbath in the country if he wasn't reelected in November. Now, he was talking about the auto industry, and his campaign later clarified his comments. This is after President Biden's campaign really seized on those comments and said that this is exactly why President Biden is the candidate that should win the November election. And
so let's pause there for a second, because a lot of people have been retweeting that statement and not mentioning the follow-up to that, which I think is important to people here. He was talking about the auto industry. That's what she's explaining to people. But what people are doing is they're clipping just that part where he says if he doesn't win in November, it's going to be a bloodbath. And people are using that. Joe Biden's doing it too. People are using that and saying that basically he's trying to incite another January 6th. So it's important to hear the context, I think. And I looked at it too, like I double looked at it and I was like, wait a minute, he said what? And then I actually did a little bit more digging and I was like, oh, there's more to this statement. It wasn't just that. But you see what they're trying to do. I've said this before. If you're going to beat Donald Trump, beat him at the ballot box, beat him on the debate stage, right? Like that's how you beat him. Don't try to beat him by making it seem like, or like taking parts of his statement and making it seem like he's trying to basically incite some type of violence when he wasn't. And it pains me to say that. I don't like Donald Trump. I don't like Donald Trump and I don't like Joe Biden. But this is dirty politics. That's exactly what's happening here.
and highlighted former President Trump's comments saying that he was calling for violence, if he didn't win the election. Now, President Trump's campaign later clarified and said that his comments were an extension of what he was saying about the auto industry and talking about how the tariff rates would be escalated if he wasn't reelected. So there was a back and forth between his campaign and President Biden's campaign last night.
All right, and I know we have something to show our viewers, Sarakshi. Let's show our viewers that clip, and I'll talk to you on the other side.
If you're listening, President Xi, and you and I are friends, but he understands the way I deal, we're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars. If I get elected, now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole, that's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country.
Now, Sarakshi, to your point, that clarification was needed. Like you mentioned, he was talking about the auto industry. Let's talk about President Biden, though. He was at the Gridiron dinner.
And let's pause there. So you guys needed to hear that. You needed to see the context about that. But again, this is dirty partisan politics. And this is actually, we're getting closer and closer to November. And it's going to get even worse as we get to November. So just get ready for it. Both sides are trying to fearmonger, though. I feel like both sides are like, and it's just, to me, it just shows you like why more people are choosing to register as independents, why more people are just like, honestly, I'm tired of the two-party system. This is just ridiculous. I think it is actually pretty embarrassing that in 2024, we actually do have these two people again, that we have Biden and Trump again. It just says a lot. And it's also going to say a lot more if Joe Biden chooses not to debate in the general. What a mess. What a mess. But yeah, according to Symone Sanders, the hypocrisy is just hilarious to me.